Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing our deep dive, looking at a stack of sources you've shared. We're really zeroing in on Nigeria's energy sector, President Tinubu's first couple of years. Our mission here is, well, to cut through the noise and just pull out the core insights for you from this material.
Right. And looking across these different sources, the overall picture they paint isn't, some dramatic overnight transformation. It's more a trend of modest but, well, noticeable recovery in oil and gas.
Modest recovery, okay.
Yeah, crude oil output, it's seen a slight uptick, hovering around, say, 1.6 to 1.7 million barrels per day, give or take. And the sources generally link this positive direction, this resilience and growth, mainly to specific policy reforms, some investment efforts, and production activities.
And the sources really do highlight that immediate action. Day one, right, the fuel subsidy announcement, that felt, well, seismic according to the material. What was the thinking there based on the sources, and what else happened early on policy-wise?
Yeah, that subsidy removal was huge, very impactful. But it was really just the starting point. The sources detail a whole range of follow-up reforms, fiscal incentives too. They talk about executive orders, trying to streamline contracting, cut through some of that red tape that slows things down, and also applying local content rules carefully, trying to boost Nigerian involvement without scaring off investment.
Right, a balancing act.
Exactly. Plus, you had those reforms in May 2024, specifically targeting, it seems, some gaps identified in the Petroleum Industry Act, the PIA, that foundational law.
So these policies, they aren't just on paper. The sources point to actual developments.
They do. Like, there's a report mentioned from the NMDPRA, that's the downstream regulator. It indicates about half of the registered petroleum depots, maybe around 256 total, are actually operational now.
Okay, that sounds like it could make a difference for distribution.
It speaks to infrastructure improvements, yeah. And another thing noted is Nigeria securing the Africa Energy Bank headquarters for Abuja. That's framed as a vote of confidence, expected to open, before the end of Q2 2025. Could be a boost for energy finance.
And we also see these big moves by Nigerian companies highlighted in your sources. Seplat finalizing the deal for Mobil, producing Nigeria Unlimited from ExxonMobil late last year. Now SAPNU and Awando acquiring Egypt assets too. Those are significant shifts.
Oh, absolutely. Far from small deals. These indigenous plays are presented as quite key. And you combine that with domestic refining, especially the Dangote refinery starting up operations. The sources really point to a noticeable impact on economic growth there. The numbers are, well, quite interesting.
Like what?
The sources quote, the oil refining subsector seeing real GDP growth of 9.59% in Q4 2024. And they stress this is its first quarterly growth in 5 years, suggests maybe a turning point driven by that new domestic capacity.
Wow. First growth in 5 years for refining. That is a big deal. And the sources suggest this feeds into a wider rebound for the whole oil and gas sector.
Exactly. The bigger picture, according to the sources, shows the entire oil and gas sector expanding by 5.54% annually in 2024. You contrast that with a contraction of 2.22% back in 2023. So quite a swing. The sources link this to that mix of factors. Production efforts, policy effects, refining coming online.
And investment.
Yeah, even with, the broader economic challenges Nigeria is facing, the sources mentioned over $500 million in foreign direct investment deals signed. They present this as a sign that investors, still see potential there under the current setup.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. The CNG initiative, compressed natural gas for transport. That's meant to directly hit people's pockets, right? The sources detail its launch, the goals.
Very ambitious goals. The stated aim is saving over 2 trillion naira a month, currently spent importing petrol and diesel, PMS and AG Go. The idea being you free up massive resources for healthcare, education, things like that, and potentially slash transport costs by maybe 60%, which could help tackle inflation.
Huge potential benefits then,
But, and this is crucial, the sources are very careful to note that despite the launch, the actual felt impact of this CNG policy, it is yet to be significantly felt by Nigerians. That's a direct quote reflection from the material.
That gap between the goal and the reality on the ground is important context from the sources. And speaking of challenges, the sources don't just paint a rosy picture, do they? They include concerns from some experts.
No, they definitely acknowledge ongoing issues. The underperformance of the state-owned refineries is mentioned pretty clearly. That's separate from private ventures like Dangote. And the issue of entrenched corruption in the sector. That's also raised by experts quoted in the sources. Needs more work despite reforms. Again, we're just relaying what's in the material provided, not taking a stance, but those concerns are present.
Right. So bringing it all together, What does this deep dive tell us? It seems like a really nuanced picture of the energy sector's first 2 years under Tinubu, based on these sources. You've got clear positives pointed out, policy moves like subsidy removal, streamlining rules, big Nigerian company deals, that refining GDP turnaround thanks to Dangote, overall sector growth.
Yeah, definite signs of progress highlighted.
But then the sources consistently show the flip side too.
Yeah.
Those persistent challenges, state refineries, corruption, and the fact that major initiatives like CNG aimed at the average person haven't quite landed yet in terms of impact.
Exactly. And it leaves you, the listener, with a key question to ponder, really.
Hmm.
You see a sector that seems to be rebounding, driven by these policies and private investment, with huge stated goals. How might the lived experience of these changes, especially the cost savings aimed at citizens, actually evolve, over the next year or so as things hopefully bed in?
Definitely something to keep an eye on based on everything we've explored here from the sources today.